This Teaching Creative Arts video is going to talk about classifying musical instruments, but specifically traditional African instruments. If you'd like to follow in your textbook, we are on page 148. African instruments can be divided into 4 categories. We have membranophones, aerophones, chordophones, and idiophones. This video is going to outline what each of these categories entails and give examples of the instruments that might fall into each category. Start off talking about membranophones, and the part of that word that probably sticks out to you is the word membrane. So what is a membranophone? It is when a membrane is pulled over a hollow frame of wood or clay and the membrane vibrates to produce a sound. So as soon as we see this word membrane, we can think of things like drums. Membranophones can be tuned to produce higher or lower sounds. So the tighter the membrane on the top of the frame, the higher the sound is going to be. The larger the drum as well, the lower the sound is going to be. So the larger the drum, the looser the membrane, the lower the sound. The smaller the drum, the tighter the membrane, the higher the drum. Different tones can be produced by hitting the drum in different ways and in different places. So we can do a bass slap. This is when we might hit the rim of the drum with the fingers. We can do a muffle where we hit the drum head with a cupped palm, so not a flat hand, but rather a rounded or cupped hand. Or we could do an open slap. This is when we hit the drum with an open palm, and it creates a higher, sort of louder sound, a brighter sound as well. So there are many different types and sizes of African drums that can be found. For example, we have cylindrical drums, which are sort of round in a cylinder shape. We have a conical drum, which is more like a cone, so a longer size. We have hourglass drums, which are in an hourglass shape, and sometimes the drum might have 2 membranes. So there is a membrane on either side, and you can play it on both sides of the drum. In this case, the drum is normally put on its side, as in the picture on the right, and the player would stand over it, able to play with the left hand on the left side and the right hand on the right side. Our next section is chordophones. A chordophone is an instrument that produces sound by the vibration of the strings, so similar to our string section in the Western orchestra. The strings can be plucked by the fingers or hit with wooden beaters, and these instruments often have a resonator which amplifies the original sound. So a resonator is normally a hollow type of box where the sound would travel through and therefore be louder. So what types of chordophones might we find? Over here we have the musical bow, which is probably the oldest and the simplest chordophone. It was developed from the hunting bow and arrow and comprises just a single string, which is stretched from one end of a wooden bow to the other. Sometimes a calabash is attached, as in the pictures you can see there, and the calabash would work to amplify the sound, to make it louder. The musical bow can be plucked, or it can be hit with a stick, as is in the picture on the right. The musician is hitting it with a stick. Another type of chordophone is the ramkey. This is a type of folk guitar originating from South Africa. And traditionally, a calabash would be used as a sound box, similar to the picture in the right. But due to urbanization and modernization, these days a ramkey is often made with empty oil cans, as in the picture on the left. Other chordophones might include zithers, where the strings are stretched across, over, or inside a resonator. A lute, where the strings are stretched across a resonator and up a neck, and the strings could be plucked or bowed. And the lyre, where the strings leave the resonator at right angles to an edge and run to a crossbar that is held away from the resonator. Aerophones, you might notice the part air in the word, which of course means that this is an instrument we're going to blow. So the sound here is produced by vibrating air, and aerophones are usually blown to produce a sound. The pitch of the instrument depends on the length of the pipe. So the shorter the instrument, the higher the sound. The longer the instrument, the lower the sound. What types of aerophones might we find? Over here we have the pan flute or pan pipes, which is a set of tuned reed pipes bound together from the highest, which is the shortest, to the lowest or the longest. The musician will blow over the top to generate vibrations of air which move down the pipe. So similar to if you put a glass bottle against your lips and blow, sometimes you can create a nice sound. And this is also the way you would play the flute in the Western orchestra. We also have the reed flute, which consists of a single pipe and a row of finger holes is cut into the pipe to allow different pitches to be produced. And finally, horns. Horns are actual animal horns, but a hole is put into the side on the narrow end, so the sort of narrow end of the horn, and this hole is blown through. The player changes the tension of the lips in order to create different pitches, which is similar to some of our brass instruments from the Western orchestra. We have the idiophones section, and the idiophones create sound when the instruments are hit or shaken. The instruments in the idiophone section are mostly made from naturally sonorous or self-sounding materials, for example, wood, stone, or metal. So materials that naturally create a nice sound or a loud sound. Types of idiophones include rattles, which are made of dried out calabashes containing maybe stones or seeds, and these are hit or shaken in order to produce a sound. It can also include jingles. These are often worn on the body or sewn into the clothing of dancers, and as the dancer moves, a rhythmic percussive sound is made. Here we have the shield. This is traditionally used by a warrior, but it can be hit on the ground or beaten with a stick to create a rhythmic sound. Here we have a cowbell. This is a metal bell played with a stick. Creates quite a nice bright sort of sound. The xylophone or marimba is a set of tuned wooden bars. The wooden bars rest on a frame with calabashes underneath acting as a resonator. The wooden bars are hit with a stick to create a sound, and it produces a pitched sound similar to a Western xylophone. So the shorter the wooden block, the higher the sound that will be created, the longer, the lower. Finally, we have the mbira or the kalimba, which is unique to Africa. This is sometimes also called a thumb piano or a finger piano, and these long metal bars are fastened onto a piece of wood, and these are plucked mostly by the thumbs. You can see that this is a pitched instrument because the metal bars are of differing lengths. So the shorter the bar, the higher the sound, the longer the bar, the lower the sound.